So, friends, thanks for tuning in. It's our weekly sermon recap podcast. We're following up with Pastor, but before I ask him any questions and let him spout the immense wisdom, let me exhort you to go into your podcast app right now, whether you're on iPhone or Android, and search Valleydale. You search that word Valleydale, you're going to see two podcasts come up. One is this one, where we put our sermons and our sermon recaps. And the other is our resources podcast. You're going to see both of those. Click subscribe to both of them. That's your way to get all the new resources that we release every week from both Sunday and Wednesday night. Do that and rejoice and be glad. And at some point, our At This Time podcast is going to be up as well. But for right now, it's already up. At noon today, At This Time will be up. And you can check out last week's At This Time episode on YouTube. That's how you connect with us. That's how you get our resources. Now, Pastor, let's create a new resource, shall we?
Okay.
Yesterday, this is part of our One series, and you kicked things off officially yesterday by preaching through our mission statement as a church. You want to help us review what that is?
Yeah, generations helping our busy community to know Christ and live for Him. That's our mission statement.
And I liked where you started. You talked about like the knowing Christ and living for Him, and that's where you took us to. You said that should be our identity as a church, and you talked about the danger of losing your identity as a church.
I think churches can lose their identity. In fact, I think there are a lot of churches out there that have lost their identity, and they can't even identify that they've lost their identity.
It's a scary proposition.
They're looking to the past. They're looking back, and they're grasping at something back there to say, "Oh, this was our identity," And if we could just recover who we were, if we could go back and just relive that day, relive that time. I often quote. Oh, gosh, now his name just flies out of my head. He was German. He was this...
Bonhoeffer?
No, this business guru who died not long ago.
Oh, okay.
And he talked about that. In his last interview, they asked him, they said, "Why did you leave Germany and come to America?" And he said, let me put it like this. He said, in Europe, they're always looking how they can recreate yesterday. And he said in America, they're always looking for tomorrow. So he said it was the future, looking.
Yes.
Decker. Wasn't his name Decker?
Possibly.
Anyway, I can't think of it right at this second. But that's what he said. And there are a lot of churches that are constantly, if we could just go back to yesterday.
Well, and that's the way that people drift. Because there's usually not that one prophetic voice that steps up and says, okay, we need to forget what's in the past and strain towards what will be in the future. One phrase that kept coming up to us as we were crafting this statement, talking about the culture of the church, was without vision, people cherish. Mm-hmm. They hold on to things that aren't necessarily part of their identity.
Yeah, and they'll do silly things, trying to grasp. To me, honestly, I think it's a way to say we're not going to really do anything. We're just going to dream about the past and talk about the past and try to live in the past, and that means I don't have to do a cotton-picking thing right now in the present.
Well, and sadly what happens is a lot of churches follow that viewpoint all the way to their doom. And the church is eventually disbanded. Yeah. But what does it look like for a church, as in your estimation, with your experience, what does it look like for a church that finds its true identity?
When a church finds its identity, it discovers its God-given direction, its God-given mission, and its God-given intention. God has a direction and a mission and an intention for every church, really for every believer.
Yes.
Now, when I say church, I'm not talking about a building. I'm talking about the people. So collectively and individually, that could be said of both.
Well, and you said that in a really succinct way yesterday. You said this building doesn't witness to anybody.
No, I've come to church buildings all my life, and I've never seen one yet share the gospel with anybody. It's people who do that. All the emphasis that we put on a building or own buildings is really it's moot. A building is a tool.
Right.
Anyway, that's a long way to get back and say it's the people who do this.
Yeah, and you want the people to discover their direction, their
Yes.
mission, and their God-given intention.
Individually and collectively.
So we're doing that by using a different tool. We're using this mission statement. And you took us through what that looks like as we find out our identity as the salt of the earth, as the light of the world. In our estimation, as we prayed through it, that looks like us being generations helping our busy community know Christ and live for Him.
Yeah.
You want to talk a bit about the generations piece of
Well,
it?
the generation piece for our church, this is our mission statement. We aren't trying to be somebody else. And I
Right,
think so
right.
many churches attempt to do, I think so many preachers attempt to do that. So we're going to be uniquely who we are. And we are generations. That's perhaps the most unique thing right now about Valleydale, and that everybody identifies. They walk in the door, they sense it. It's an immediate. It's immediately apparent to them that this is who this church is. And when we say generations, it's everybody. There's this great sense of family.
Yes.
A lot of churches say we're going to reach this age group right here.
Right.
We want them from this age to this age, and we're not going to be bothered with anybody else. Well, that's not true of Valleydale. Valleydale is made up of all these generations who interact. There is so much community in this church.
Yes, there's unity as well.
That it is hard to describe. I've really never been in a church that has had the deep sense of community that this church has, the way we respond, react to one another.
I've seen that as well. It was apparent to me as soon as I got here a few years ago. Another thing that I hadn't thought of until now, but just with medical technology being what it is, life expectancy has gone up. We actually have more generations around, perhaps. Like this is a unique point in history in that way.
Yeah. People are living to an older age.
That's
They're more active in their older age.
I think that's the biggest piece of it.
That's right. Old people are acting like young people.
That's you,
There
brother.
you go. Yeah, that's me.
You eat Krispy Kremes with the passion of a 20-year-old. I must say.
Yeah.
But
that's why I'm in the shape I'm in.
Well, I think you're in great shape. Another funny thing is that the churches that will go after a particular because I was a part of churches like this in the past, where you go after like a particular sect of the population. And maybe you get, wow, you're so good at reaching 25-year-olds. But there's a unique thing about 25-year-olds is that they tend to get older. And so then you get older, and then like you thought you were reaching this one, but then the people that are there, they get older. So I feel like I would hope that any healthy church, their destiny would be to have many generations that they're ministering to.
Well, I would think so. You'd hope. I mean, you think about that around the family table. What are you going to do at Christmas time? Are you going to write the children and say, y'all are not invited this Christmas to the older, well, we don't want y'all here. We're just going to take everybody in their 20s and 30s and the rest of the family. Y'all have a good Christmas, but it's just that's just lame.
I'm still waiting to just not be sitting at the kids' table at Thanksgiving. They still put me there. Like I'm 33. Can I get a shout out? So anyway, I feel like that's a good explanation of where we are with generations, uniqueness in our church now. One word, helping, like as I've thought about this, as I've shared it with other people, a lot of times I gloss over the word helping. But you push that really hard. You even showed it to us in the story of David in 1 Chronicles. Talk about that a little bit.
1 Chronicles chapter 12 is a great chapter. It's at that point where all of the other tribes are beginning now to defect to David. He is on the run from Saul. He's in Ziklag, and they're all coming to Ziklag to him. And the reason they do it is because they've watched David now over these years. They've got two leaders. One is Saul, who is demented, is the best way to put it, I guess. And he is constantly grinding axes. He is constantly threatened by somebody else's leadership. He's constantly living in paranoia. And here's David, who's out there, and he's running, trying to protect himself from Saul. But at the same time, in the midst of that, he's helping people.
That's right.
He's helping all of these other little towns and villages and things like that as they come under attack. Saul's not doing what he really should be doing. So people have watched that, and they're attracted to it.
Yeah.
People are attracted to a church that helps the community, that helps people.
Well, and that's a challenging word because it forces us to re-examine everything that we're doing in the community and ask, is this actually helpful? In what ways can we measure whether this is helpful?
You know, a lot of times, and I hope you hear what I'm saying, a lot of times a church will be involved with something that they'll call ministry, which is really more about making them feel good than it is actually helping somebody in the community.
You're exactly right.
We want our miracle all over again. We want us to feel good again. We want us to, it goes back to the past. I'm living in the past. If we do this, this is going to make us feel good about ourselves. Instead of, we're actually going out there and being the feet and the hands, the ears, the arms, the eyes of Christ.
Well, and the only way that you can really figure that out, are we being the body of Christ, is by actually figuring out ways that you can measure results of what you do in the community. How many people are being discipled? You know, that, like, what stories do you have of life change that are there? Which that's difficult to do. That's something that we need to keep praying about. But I want to move on as well to talking. I want to talk about the word community, and then I want us to come back to busy. So you, Pastor, it was deeply convicting for me. I think that passage in Luke 10 where Jesus is talking to the rich young ruler is, the word I keep using is incisive. It really cuts to the heart because we all seek to justify ourselves. And in verse 29, he comes back to Jesus and he says, if I'm going to love my neighbor as myself, my question to you, Jesus, is who is my neighbor?
Yeah.
And then, of course, Jesus basically says anyone that's around you.
Yeah. Well, that leads into perhaps one of the most famous parables or stories that Jesus told of all, and that's the Good Samaritan, who was, you know, the racial difference between the Jews and the Samaritans. And this guy's beaten up and left in a ditch, and all the religious guys, all the preachers go around him, all the staff move around the guy. We don't have time for that. Mm-hmm. And then this Samaritan, who is racially different than the Jew, comes by and pours himself into the guy. Even financially takes on the burden of seeing that the guy is taken care of and cared for.
My takeaway from that is it's easy to say that, to listen to that, especially the racial piece, and be like, yeah, well, you know, I'm not racist, and I like help other people wherever I see. But like in our context, maybe the most difficult application is, hey, you know that person you just don't like at work? Yeah. Hey, you know that person in your family who just kind of rubs you the wrong way? Like, that's still your neighbor. Yeah. You still need to be loving and sacrificial towards that person.
Yeah, whoever you're around. You know, corporately, the church has a community. You know, the church gathers at a place. There's a corporate community to a church. But in all honesty, the church is the people. When the people go out, it's whoever's around you is your community. You have a community at work. You have a community at school. You have a community in your neighborhood. You have a community down at the Little League, you know, where you take junior to play ball. That becomes a community as well. It's the same question, who is my neighbor? Who is my community? Whoever happens to be right there around you at the time.
We recently ordained Patrick Sawyer, who's our community connection pastor, and the plans that he's making as far as us being able to reach out and truly help our busy community are fantastic. But the reason that I bring it up is that one person recently asked him, like, oh, so like you're now employed so that you can like create this community. Mm-hmm. And his response was wise. He basically said, well, like, your community is already created. Yeah. Like, the Lord's already put you in a community. Like, Patrick is helping us in a macro sense. Like, how do we move as a church? Yeah. But this gets back to what you're saying. Like, God has a unique intention for you in your community.
Well, it's
already.
just like missions. The church is given the mission. We're to go into Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the uttermost parts of the earth. I don't get to, as a church, as pastor of a church, I don't get to cut one of those out and say, nah, we're not going to do that. But as an individual, I can sense that God has called me to do something internationally.
Yeah.
And to do something locally. So I get to say, well, I believe the Lord's leading me right now at this time to go and to do this local ministry. Well, that's good. You need to be on mission, and you need to be a part of a church that's on mission.
Yeah, for any of our friends that are listening to us right now that you're not plugged into a local church, please do so and get in touch with us so that we can help you. Felt like I wanted to put that in there. But before we close, I do want to talk about this busy word, Pastor, and we put it in there, and it does make the statement that much more unique, doesn't it? To describe our community as busy, which that's what we were after, saying like we want to see God's unique intention for Valleydale.
Well, what we could say, generations helping our lazy community, or our
That's pretty negative. That's a drop the mic.
I don't know what it's a busy. Everybody's busy.
Yes.
Even though busy is a relative term,
it is.
We all have the same amount of hours in a day. However, we don't all have the same amount of stuff in the same amount of hours.
That's fair.
But most people would consider themselves busy. In fact, I don't know anybody that's ever looked at me and said, nah, I'm not busy. What it does is it helps us as a church focus on the best ways we can minister to people.
Yes, to people whose time is constrained. Let's be as excellent as we can possibly be.
It has less to do with what they're doing. It has more to do with how do we reach these people. It forces us to think creatively about how do we reach the community.
I think that it can also cut to the heart of some people who have perhaps been filling their time with things that shouldn't busy them. I mean, you said yesterday that people always prioritize, they'll make time for what they want to make time for.
Yeah. Well, anything you read today will tell you that the average family's schedule is built around the kids. And usually it's the kids that are driving the family schedule. I mean, how many times have you heard parents say, "Oh, we're racing, we're running, we've got this, we got that, we're going to this, we're going to that," and every bit of it is built around the children.
And that's one of the. I know that we don't have a target demographic, but if you look at the census data, those are the kind of families that are geographically the closest to our Valleydale campus right now.
Well, really, what it should be is parents should bring that schedule back into some control and say, here are the things that we're going to prioritize.
Well, and that's one of those things that's really easy to say and harder to do. But fortunately, we're actually having a parenting class that's happening every Wednesday at 6:30, and it's occurring in the big room. It's happening on campus. It's called Parenting Today for Tomorrow. And if you're listening to this and what Pastor said actually is convicting to you, you need to show up and you need to be a part of that. And if you can't, then hopefully one of these days we'll be able to release that one as a podcast as well. That'd be good. So that's our busy community. We don't necessarily want to talk people out of being busy, but we pray that we can have them be about the work of their Father, the business of the advancement of the kingdom of Christ.
Yeah.
So that is our mission statement. We're not going to stop talking about it. It is going to be part of our identity as a church. But we can't accomplish that mission statement without a passion that fuels our fire to be about the work of the Lord. And we have values that are a statement of that passion that we have. And that's where you're going this week, right?
Yeah, truth that transforms.
Truth with transformation.
What is the one thing that can transform life, that can change life?
Only the gospel.
The gospel.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about that more. I think that the prayer point is that we are in the Bible Belt. We have a lot of people that know the head truth, and it hasn't truly transformed them, which is why we phrased it that way. Pastor, we're going to be praying for you as you continue to prepare that message, and I'll leave you.
Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else you want to say before I close this up?
I'm good.
With all that, I want to exhort you guys one more time. Make sure you're subscribed to our podcast. Check out that YouTube channel as well. You can always subscribe there, and I think you can click a bell to get notifications as well, because YouTube likes to they like to hide your videos and stuff like that. They want to make you pay for things. How dare they? Google should be giving us everything for free. You hear that, Google? All right, think I've jumped the shark. Been great spending this time with you guys. We'll see you next week.